Welcome back to our lecture series on sustainable finance and sustainable investing in particular. Before we ask whether sustainable investing pays, we need to be clear about what investors are actually measuring when they say ESG. Let's break the three letters down. The E, environmental, covers things like energy use, emissions, water, waste, and overall climate impact. The S, social, covers labor standards, workplace safety, diversity, relations with local communities, and increasingly the whole supply chain. How a company's suppliers treat their workers. And the G, governance, covers the board's structure and independence, anti-corruption safeguards, whether executive pay is linked to sustainability targets and whistleblowing protections. Two observations here. First, governance is the oldest and best established of the three. Investors have always cared about how a company is run, whereas the environmental and social dimensions are newer and harder to measure. And second, these criteria are broad and sometimes in tension. A company can be excellent on the E and poor on the S. That breadth is exactly why turning ESG into a single number is so difficult, which is the problem we turn to shortly. Now, ESG ratings try to score companies, but there's a more fundamental question. What even counts as a green activity in the first place? This is what the European Union Taxonomy sets out to answer. We met it back in part 5, but it's central here too. The taxonomy is essentially a dictionary of sustainable economic activities. It defines 6 environmental objectives, things like climate change mitigation and adaptation. And for an activity to qualify as green, it must pass 3 tests. It has to substantially contribute to at least one of the 6 objectives. It must do no significant harm to any of the others. You can't help the climate while wrecking biodiversity. And it must meet minimum social safeguards like basic labor standards. The great value of the taxonomy is that it gives funds a common language. A fund can report what percentage of its holdings is taxonomy aligned, and that figure means the same thing across the market. It's an attempt to replace vague marketing claims with a hard shared definition of green. In practice, though, most investors don't do this analysis themselves. They buy ESG ratings from specialist providers, outsourcing the costly research. And here we hit a serious problem, one we flagged in part 5, but which matters enormously for investing. The rating providers disagree strongly. Berg, Colbell, and Rigobon, in a well-known 2022 study, showed that the correlation between the major ESG raters is low. They often reach very different conclusions about the same company. Compare that with credit ratings, where the agencies almost always agree. Now here's the twist that makes this more than an academic annoyance. Gibson, Brandon, Kruger, and Schmidt in 2021 showed that ESG rating disagreement is itself priced into stock returns. The uncertainty about a firm's sustainability carries a risk premium. And the practical punchline is striking. Depending on which rating provider you choose, the very same portfolio can flip from looking green to looking brown. So when someone tells you a fund is sustainable, your first question should be, sustainable according to whom? The classic example is Tesla. On the environmental dimension, Tesla looks like a hero. It makes electric cars. But on governance and some social measures, raters have flagged serious concerns, from boardroom controversies to labor practices. So one rating agency can call Tesla a sustainability leader, while another marks it down sharply. Same company, opposite verdicts. Now recall the delegation chain and the principal agent problem from the first video. The fund manager gets to choose which rating provider to rely on. That's a subtle but powerful discretion. By shopping for the rating that flatters their existing holdings, a manager can make almost any portfolio look green. The measurement problem, in other words, doesn't just add noise. It hands the industry a lever for greenwashing. It sits underneath everything else in this chapter, which brings us to the question everyone actually wants answered. Part C, does sustainable investing pay? This is where the marketing meets the data and where careful economic theory turns out to be essential. Because as we'll see, the honest answer is more interesting and more subtle than either the enthusiasts or the skeptics would like. Let's frame the debate cleanly with three competing hypotheses. Hypothesis 1, underperformance. By constraining your choices, refusing to hold certain stocks, ESG shrinks your opportunity set, which financial theory says can only raise your cost or lower your return. Fewer options can't help you. Hypothesis 2, outperformance. ESG signals quality. Well-governed, forward-looking firms avoid scandals and disasters, so tilting toward them earns higher returns. Hypothesis 3, no difference. Markets are efficient, sustainability is already priced in, so once everyone knows about it, there's no free lunch. Performance ends up equal. The empirical evidence, frustratingly, is mixed, with studies supporting all three. And this is precisely where theory earns its keep, because it helps us separate two things that get carelessly mixed up. Expected returns, what you should rationally anticipate going forward, and realized returns, what actually happened in a particular past period. Keep that distinction sharp. It's the key that unlocks the whole puzzle. Let me foreshadow why it matters so much, because it resolves an apparent contradiction you'll hear constantly. People point to the last decade and say, green funds beat the market, so sustainability pays. And they're often right about the past. That's a realized return. But the expected return looking forward can be low at the very same time. How? Because if investors suddenly fall in love with green assets and bid their prices up, green stocks deliver a great one-time gain as the repricing happens, a high realized return, even though from their new higher prices, their future expected return is now low. So green won last decade, and green should earn less going forward, are not contradictory at all. They're two different quantities. Almost every confused argument about ESG performance comes from mixing these two up. Let's start with the broadest possible view of the evidence. Friede, Busch, and Bassen, colleagues from the University of Hamburg in 2015, did a great meta-analysis. They aggregated around 2,200 separate empirical studies of the link between ESG and financial performance. Very likely the most comprehensive review ever done up until that point. And their headline finding is encouraging. About 90% of studies find a non-negative relation between ESG and performance, and a large majority is actually positive. Taken at face value, that sounds like a decisive win for sustainable investing. But, and this is why we're careful scientists, the studies differ enormously in their methods, their samples, their time periods, and their definitions of ESG. Averaging across 2,000 very different studies can hide as much as it reveals. So the honest reading is, there's little evidence that ESG systematically hurts returns, which is genuinely reassuring. But does not hurt is a much weaker and more defensible claim than reliably beats the market. Hold that thought as we turn to the theory that explains why. Now, the single most important idea in this chapter, the equilibrium model of Pastor Stambaugh and Taylor from 2021. Their logic is quite fascinating, and once you see it, almost obvious. Suppose, as we established earlier, that many investors get genuine utility from holding green assets and dislike holding brown ones. What happens when lots of investors feel that way? They bid up the prices of green stocks, and a higher price today mechanically means a lower expected return going forward. So in equilibrium, when the market has settled, green assets have lower expected returns, precisely because investors are willing to pay a premium to hold them. Now flip that around and look at the company's side, because this is the crucial payoff. A green firm whose stock investors bid up, therefore enjoys a lower cost of capital. And a lower cost of capital is exactly the channel through which the financial market funds the transition. It makes green projects cheaper to finance and brown ones more expensive. There's one more subtlety which we'll unpack next time. Green assets can still outperform in the short run, but only if climate concerns rise unexpectedly. So the theory predicts lower expected returns for green, even though green might beat brown in any given lucky period. And notice what this model quietly resolves. It turns sacrificing return from a bug into a feature. Many people hear green assets earn less as bad news for sustainable investing. But look at it from the planet's point of view. The whole goal is to channel cheap capital to green firms and make dirty firms pay more to finance themselves. A lower expected return on green stocks is exactly the same thing, seen from the other side, as a lower cost of capital for green companies. In other words, the sacrifice investors make is not wasted. It is the precise mechanism by which the financial market pushes money toward the transition. The investor's modest giving up of return is the green firm's cheaper financing. That elegant two-sidedness is why this paper is so celebrated. And that distinction between expected and realized returns is the heart of the whole "does it pay" debate. Let's pull this together. Investors measure sustainability through ESG criteria and the EU Taxonomy, but they mostly rely on ratings, and those ratings disagree so much that the same portfolio can look green or brown, depending on the provider. On performance, the huge meta-analysis suggests ESG at least does no harm. And the key theory from Pastor Stambaugh and Taylor explains why. If investors love green, they bid its price up. So green has lower expected returns and, on the flip side, a lower cost of capital that funds the transition. In the next video, we test that theory against the data, dissecting green returns, the carbon premium, and why short-termism gets in the way. See you there.